see the Searle's Theory of Speech Act. So Searle explains a typical speech situation where speech involves speaker, hearer, and utterance by the speaker. So in his famous article, What is a Speech Act?, Searle tries to explain why it is of interest and importance in the philosophy of language to study speech acts or linguistic acts. So a linguistic act is essential for any linguistic communication. This is what Searle says. So for example, a skeptic might take a noise or a mark on a paper to be a sign of linguistic communication, and therefore we need to pay attention on all these things for developing an effective communication. So for achieving a linguistic communication, we have to understand Searle's theory of speech act. So Searle argues that asking question or making statements are rule governed, which is similar to the game like chess. So Searle tries to explicate the notion of an illocutionary act. So you already know what does it mean to be illocutionary act. So he has given two things, necessary and sufficient condition for the performance of a particular kind of illocutionary act. And then he talks about a set of semantical rules for such use of expression which will mark the utterance as an illocutionary act. So there may be certain rules which could be implied for the expression to be an illocutionary act. And now he has given a distinction between regulative and constitutive rules. So let us figure it out. So constitutive rules and the imperative rule. So what does Searle's main idea was? It was to formulate a set of constitutive rules for a certain kind of speech act, and the constitutive rules might take the form of imperative rules. So it might be sounding something technical. So we have seen this example earlier, like will John leave the room, John will leave the room, John leave the room. So in all these things, if we go slowly, we will understand that utterance is different. So for example, in this thing, will John leave the room? This is a question mark. Then John will leave the room. This is a statement. And then John leave the room. This is a request. So all these utterances are performed differently, and therefore these are example of illocutionary act. So we already know that the first one is question, second one is assertion, like prediction, third one and fourth one is like a hypothetical expression. So illocutionary act referred to the act that are something different by its expressions. Okay, so now the common content that you can see here is called proposition, and the speaker is expressing the proposition, but the proposition is expressed by the speaker in uttering the sentences. Alright, now let's see about this thing, that all this illocutionary act has two major things, that is proposition indicating element and the function indicating device. So distinction between this function indicating device is that the same proposition can be common to all sorts of illocutionary act, while the function indicating devices are different in the different illocutionary act. This means that the function indicating device like question mark and all these things can be common to all kind of illocutionary act, but the function indicating device, that means what is the purpose of this statement, right? Purpose of the statement, what does its statement mean, what does its statement want from us, all this could be different in an illocutionary act. So he has written the book Speech Acts, where he talked about illocutionary act, and he has given the example I promise as a model of illocutionary act. So in this, let us understand one by one. Firstly, he said that the speaker and the hearer must both be conscious of what they are doing and must not have any speech and hearing problems which are impediments to communication. So for having a proper communication, a speaker and hearer must be conscious of what they are doing, and they should not be having any kind of problems so that their communication is interfered. Secondly, one has to isolate the proposition from the rest of the speech act. So, if you have to understand the speech act, then you have to differentiate, or you have to just isolate the proposition so that you can understand the speech act. So like in a promise, an act must be predicated of the speaker and it cannot be a past act, since I cannot promise to have done something in the past. So if you are using the term, using this I promise, then obviously you have to separate the things of the past, because the past is not included, it is just about the future that we are going to talk. So Searle explains that I cannot promise to do something. It is obvious that to all concerned that I am going to do it anyhow. So example, a happily married man who promises his wife that he will not desert her in the next week is likely to provide more anxiety than comfort, because this statement is contradictory. It reflects that there is some kind of conflicts on the mind of a person, of a husband, married man, and this kind of statement reveals that wife will be more anxious to know that why his man is saying like that. So this is a distinction between sincere and insincere promise. So Searle mentioned an essential condition for promise. It is the undertaking of an obligation to perform a certain act. So according to Searle, promise is something which is an obligation to perform a certain act. That means it is talking about the future and not about the past. So the last condition, let us talk about this. Last condition states that the meaning of a sentence is entirely determined by the meaning of its elements. So if you want to understand the meaning of the sentence, then you should know the meaning of its elements, which is both lexical and syntactical. It includes the grammar, it includes the structure also. So to conclude, we have seen about the Austin and Searle. They have introduced Speech Act for understanding the language. So what they say? They say that language is not static, but it is dynamic. And in order to understand the language, we just not have to know the proposition, the grammar, the structure, but we have to know more than that. And what is that more? That is a speech act. So speech act is understand by knowing the meaning of the word, knowing the sentence meaning. All these things help us to determine the meaning of a speech act. So the meaning of the sentence is best understood from the intention of the speaker. If you want to understand the intention of the speaker, then you should know the meaning of any word and what he tries to convey to this audience. Alright, so questions of meaning and reference can be seen in the context of speaker's meaning something by something and referring to something in the utterance of an expression. So Searle is also talking about that how we can understand speech act and how we can justify speech act theory so that the language understanding and the barriers in the language understanding could be reduced.